So today I want to talk about communication and its role in leadership in any given team, really. Communication is like one of the most common words you'll always hear thrown around, like, oh, the key to, having a successful team is good communication, or if you want to solve this issue, you just need to have good communication. Um, Again, it's thrown around a ton, and I think it's thrown around so much to the point that people don't appreciate the actual complication and the difficulty of good communication. I mean, you can say it really easy, like, oh, just have good communication. But good communication is not just a light switch. It's something that takes a lot of practice and a lot of work to actually achieve. And so I just wanted to spend some time talking about that, just so people can kind of get a better idea of what good communication actually looks like and how you get from where you're at right now to having amazing conversations with your entire team. So if you're gonna start having good conversation, good quality talks with the people that you're working with, first thing that you need to be able to do before you even start to say anything, you need to have a solid idea of what it is you're actually trying to say. I can't tell you how many times people either screw up their communication because they think that they can just half-ass it, throw out a couple words, and then expect their team to put together the pieces to know exactly what they mean. This is where you'll hear phrases like, oh, you should have known what I meant, or, oh yeah, they'll get it. They'll figure out what my message actually means. That's just absolutely not good enough. If you are going to communicate with someone and you want them to know what you are saying, you absolutely first need to know what you're saying. Sometimes this means you might need to sit down for a couple minutes to, roll the idea around and actually put it into words so that people who hear it know what you're talking about. But that's something that absolutely needs to happen. You need to know what you're going to be communicating to others, because if you don't know it, why the hell would they know it? That's not a reasonable assumption that you should ever make. Once you actually think about it and you have a really good understanding of what it is that you're going to try to communicate and how you're going to try to communicate it, the next thing, when you're trying to figure out how, you need to communicate it in an appropriate way. And when I say appropriate, I mean, given the situation, it could vary. Obviously, if you're in a professional setting, there are some stricter rules than if you're in a social setting. If you're interacting with people who are, maybe more conservative or more, have strict thoughts and ideas and assumptions about how communication happens, you might have to tailor it to your audience. But honestly, I would say for the most part, you shouldn't do too much of that. You shouldn't bend over backwards to have 19 different communication styles depending on who you're working with. You should have one communication style that works for you, and you should really perfect that. You will probably have to ease people into that communication style, and that is totally fine. Like, for example, when I communicate with people, with my team, I use a shit ton of sarcasm, I swear. I try to mess with them by telling them something that's not true with a dead straight face, and if I don't ease them into that, it makes everything really, really uncomfortable, awkward, not as effective it would be nice to be. So when I'm easing them into that, when I sit down with them and I have my first conversation, I let them know that hey, my name is Josh, we're gonna be working together. I think something that's really important for us to talk about is our communication and how I communicate and how my team communicates, because if you're going to be working with my team, you're going to need to know how to do this and you're going to need to practice it. I let them know that I believe in straight and honest communication. I don't want to sugarcoat things, and I also don't want to spend 10 minutes talking about something, beating around the bush, when I could just say it in 10 seconds. When I communicate stuff to you, if it's good or bad, it doesn't matter. My intent is to make you better. My intent is going to be, either identifying things you did great in, fantastic, or it's going to be identifying stuff that you screwed up in, and I'm going to offer you assistance because you need to know that so that you can make improvements so your overall game can be better. But I'm not going to be sugarcoating anything for you. There are going to be times where you're probably going to think that the things that I'm saying are because I don't like you, I hate you, I want you to fail. And I promise you it's not. It might take a little bit of time before you fully believe that. But everything I tell you is to make you better. That's how I communicate to you. That is exactly how I expect you to communicate to me. If you see that I'm screwing up, if I'm doing something incorrect, if I'm not doing something to the best of my ability, I want you to immediately call me out on it. I don't care who's around. I don't care who hears. You say, hey, Josh, you're fucking up. And that is how I learn. That's how I will immediately, know that, oh, wow, am I messing up? Let me hear more about what this person has to say. Especially when there are other people around. I think that makes me a lot more accountable because there are other people who are hearing that I'm screwing up and I want to be like, oh, shit, I better fix this quick. That's my style. That's what works for me. That is what makes an efficient team, that when I'm on it. Everyone has their own style. If you want to try mine, you definitely can. But most people probably already have their, styles of communication. So really kind of master that. Know how it is that you communicate. Know it well enough that you can actually put it into an explanation and give that explanation to other people that you're going to communicate with. That way they know what to expect. And when they see it, they're not surprised by it. So really kind of mastering the way that you communicate is super, super important. Don't try to mimic other people. Don't, tailor it to your audience, because really if you do that, you're going to have 19 different communication styles and none of them are going to be very good because you haven't really committed to any of them. So you haven't really gotten the practice. You haven't really gotten the mastery in on that. And really, when you know what you're going to say and you figured out how you're going to say it, after you say it, you're going to get communication back to you. And this is one of the biggest areas where I see so many people struggle because they think to themselves, oh, I'm a great communicator. I can, vocalize my thoughts and opinions and plans super, super well. But they suck at getting feedback back, or they suck even just engaging in a conversation. Just how I assume when you communicate to people, people will listen, they will give you your turn, they will not interrupt. They'll actually think about the things that you're saying. You need to be able to do that when other people give you communication back, feedback, their different perspective or point of view. I think one of the biggest things that I see people do is that as soon as they hear a couple of words that they disagree with or they don't like, they just immediately jump in and say, no, I'm cutting you off. I'm putting in my 2 cents. I didn't even let you finish your sentence. I didn't even contemplate about what you said for 10 seconds after you finish saying it to see if there's any truth to that, or to see if it's accurate, or to see if that's a possibility. I just know I immediately heard something I didn't like, so I'm just going to stop it right there. I think there's no faster way to stop people from wanting to communicate with you than doing this. If you can communicate great, that's fantastic. If you can't receive communication or hear or listen to other people for shit, it's all for nothing. You need to be able to listen to others when you are communicating. It's a two-way street. If it's only you talking and you're not listening back, you're just talking at people. You're not actually talking with them. So it was an entire waste of time. Sometimes the communication you hear is not going to be good stuff. Sometimes you might disagree with it. Sometimes it might be unpleasant. It doesn't matter. You need to show people that you can communicate by listening to them. When you show that to them, they will know to expect that, okay, this is the behavior I need to engage in when Josh is talking to me, basically. So really, you think about what you want to say, you know how you want to say it, you say it, you are able to, get that feedback back, and you're able to actually listen to what the person has to say. You're able to think about it for a couple of seconds to, really think about the accuracy of it or the applicability. And the final thing I think you really need to get down for communication is you need to learn how to communicate without your emotions being involved. And I lied. I think this is probably the hardest thing for people to actually do. So, for example, if I am talking to someone and I say, hey, Bill, you need to get these reports in, every Wednesday by noon. And the last 2 weeks I've been getting them, on Thursday and Friday. You're missing your deadline. You need to make your deadline. What do you need from me in order to make sure that happens going forward? That's how it should be said. But in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my God, why isn't Bill doing his job? He doesn't respect me as a boss. He doesn't respect me as a team member. He always does this. He doesn't care about us. He's just half-assing it. I don't want to say something because if I say something the wrong way, it might come off too hard and he'll never want to work with me. He might go tell my boss that I was being, hard ass on him. But if I say it too soft, he's not going to listen. He's not going to think I'm serious. He's going to continue making the mistake over and over again, and I'll have to, do disciplinary action. there's just 100 different thoughts going through your head that will slow you down by such a massive, massive amount. And even though some of that stuff is a possibility, it might happen. If it does happen, you'll live. You'll be fine. Practice makes perfect. But just the thought of the idea that my communication could have some negative impact will sometimes just makes people just not do the communication at all. And I'm not saying sometimes, it happens a lot of time where people just feel like, oh, well, if I tell them, they're going to think that I'm trying to boss them around, or they're not going to like me as much, or they're not going to want to work with me. If they want to work with you, they need to be able to communicate with you. If they can't communicate with you, then they shouldn't be on your team. So really, don't get hung up about the way that people might perceive things. At the exact same time, you can't get hung up because you're negatively perceiving something that someone has told you. So if I'm Bill and Josh comes to me and says, hey Josh, you need to start meeting your deadlines, what do you need from me? If I'm the one who receives that criticism, realistically, what I see happen a lot is that people will just jump to, oh my god, I'm in trouble, oh my god, my boss hates me, oh my god, I suck, oh my god, I shouldn't be on this team, all these negative things just because I was given the smallest bit of feedback on, do your stuff a day earlier. When again, none of that was present. That's all in my psychology. I'm the one who's making all these assumptions based on 800 worst case scenarios. And again, that just slows down my ability to communicate as well. It makes me not enjoy work. It makes me not enjoy my coworkers. It makes me not enjoy, my supervisor. Not because of, bad things actually happening, but because of my perception on this communication. Even though the communication is, direct, sincere, straightforward, no, ulterior meaning behind it, my assumptions on it of, oh shit, everything that possibly could be wrong is wrong with this and everyone hates me, it slows you down like crazy. It slows your ability to communicate. It slows your ability to get stuff done. It slows you down at work in general. So really make sure that you are working on removing the emotion from your conversations as much as possible. I mean, there are definitely information conversations and there are emotional conversations. An informational conversation is me saying, hey, the deadline is Tuesday. You need to meet that deadline. What can I do to help you? Or the meeting was moved, from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Or I have to be home at 5 o'clock to, take my dog out. There's no emotion in that. It's just passing on information from one person to another or one person to a group. There's no emotion involved in that. And that's what I would say that's what like half of your work conversations should be like. No emotion, just pass on information and facts. The other half are the emotional conversations. And when I say half, I mean half. You should be having a lot of frequent emotional conversations when it comes to you and your team, because that's where things like appreciation, that's where things like, support, that's where things like, gratitude, that all comes from an emotional aspect. If you phrase an emotional conversation like you do an informational one, where you just say, hey everyone, Bill picked up an extra shift. Thank you, Bill. Let's move on. That was a waste of time. That was a waste of energy. Bill did not get the appreciation. Odds are he's going to be pretty irritated by that lack of genuine appreciation. Emotional conversations should be, again, direct and honest, and this actually makes a lot of people uncomfortable as well. If I'm going to show appreciation to a staff, I'm not going to half-ass it. I'm going to Leslie note blow them away. I will say, do you know what, Stacy? Over this last week, you have done so many things that were not part of your job description, not necessary for you to do, but you took the initiative to do it, to help not only myself, but your entire team. And I think if everyone were to act like you, we would be amazing. I appreciate the effort that you have put in. I appreciate the things that you have done. I cannot even begin to tell you how thankful I am to have you on my team. Thank you so much. That is an emotional conversation. If you have your gratitude and appreciation conversations like that, it hits home in the best way possible. If you have your informational conversations like that, shit goes south so fast. I mean, either it's a bad emotion and you're terrified that people hate you, or it's a good emotion and people think it's weird. Like, why are you so strangely positive about the meeting moving an hour? That's weird. I don't want to talk to you. So you have your informational conversations and your emotional conversations. Master your communication styles with both and keep them separate. Information should be half your job when you're talking about work stuff. Emotional should be half your job when you're showing gratitude and appreciation to your team. So today was actually really kind of nice because I had two fantastic examples of communication happen today. One of them was a great example. The other one was a really bad example. I'll start off with the bad one. So right now I'm temporarily working for a human service company. I operate a group home, and we were having a meeting, and our HR people come in, and they're like, hey, we're having these huge issues with retention. We're having these huge issues with motivation, morale, A, B, C, D. These are all the problems we're having. If you know why they're happening, or if you're hearing any comments from other people, let us know, because it's important to us and we want to fix it. So as soon as I walked out of the room, I was like, oh, okay. I pulled out a list of things that I had, and I tracked one of them down, and I was like, hey, do you have 10 minutes? Let me tell you about the things that I've been seeing and I've been hearing my 2 months here. And I mean, I did have a list. It was 20 items, and I got through maybe 6, and I stopped having the conversation with her. When I first started talking, she was receptive to the first 1 or 2 things, because they were serious things, and I was like, hey, this is the way that your agency's screwing up, this is the way that your administration's screwing up, this is what you're doing, this is the effect that it has directly on people, this is the effect that it has indirectly on people. And she's like, oh, okay, yep. And she listened to those, and that's fantastic. But then as I kept going, I could clearly see that she was getting uncomfortable. She didn't like to have all this feedback all at once. And if I'm being honest, she should have been able to handle that feedback without getting her emotion involved. But she was clearly just kind of constantly moving back and forth. She was just wide-eyed staring at me. She cut me off probably every 30 seconds that I had to talk, and she would just go on a rant about how what I'm saying actually isn't wrong, or what her opinion is on it. And the purpose we were having the conversation was so you could get information from me, and I'm trying to give you this information, again, in an information conversation, and she had an emotional attachment to it. She turned it into an emotional conversation, which ended up wasting 30 minutes of our time, and nowhere near as much productivity got done, because she could not handle the information that was being given to her, despite the fact that she asked for it. And that was just really, really unfortunate to hear. Because now I doubt that she's going to be able to handle the things that I actually told her about, because I was able to see what an emotional reaction she had, and B, she was not able to handle my information. So odds are I'm probably not going to bring information again to her in the future, because that's the way I've seen her react. I know she can't have that information directly. So that is an example of a conversation that went south, that was nowhere near as great as it had the potential to be. And the second example that I had, after work, I ran out to grab a couple of drinks with some of my coworkers, and one of them brought her husband, and her husband is in marketing. So I didn't really know him, I didn't catch his name, I was sitting next to him. My entire group was talking about, group home stuff, and I could see that he wasn't, keeping up with that. He's probably not familiar, which, if you're not in the group home world, that's normal. But I was trying to make small talk. He had a jacket on that had a logo. I was like, oh, is that your company or whatever? And he's like, oh no, it's actually an event that my company's putting on. And I was like, oh really? What do you do for your company? He's like, oh, well, I'm in marketing. And I was like, really? If you couldn't tell, marketing is directly related to what I'm doing right now, and what I've been doing for the last 2 days. So I was like, oh my god, this is a jackpot. Yeah, you guys keep talking about your shit. Give me him. I'm going to get all the information he has. And we probably talked for over an hour, and it was very back and forth. I would say, this is what I heard about this subject. tell me everything you know about it. And he would, talk for 10 minutes, and I would stop him only to get clarification. Like, he would say an abbreviation, and I would just say, oh, hold on, I don't know what that means. He'd clarify it, I'd say, thank you, keep going. When he was done, he would say, how does this relate to what you're trying to do? And I would talk for 10 minutes. I would say, well, what I'm trying to do is A, B, and C. This is the foundation. This is my market. This is, my marketing strategies, etc. And then when I was done talking, he would chime in and say, oh, well, these are my opinions on that. And I would say, oh, well, I never thought about it that way. Or, yeah, I did think about it this way, and this is my opinion on it. There was, no emotion involved unless, we were like, oh, that's cool, or, oh, that's a good idea. He told me things that, scared me, where I'm like, oh, my God, I didn't even think about that. Or things that, I strongly disagree with. He was like, yeah, no, whatever you're doing, this idea that you have, bad. Do this instead. And despite the fact with me, disagreeing with it, me being shocked by it, me being like, oh God, this is so much more complicated than I thought, I didn't let any of that emotion get in there. I was like, oh, okay, keep going. I want this information. This is information I need to have. Even though it's not pleasant, some of it, a lot of it was. A lot of it was fantastic. But some of it was unpleasant just because it's, different from what I was expecting. I kept my emotion out of it, because I knew that even though it's unpleasant, it will still help me. So I want every little bit that I could have. That was a fantastic conversation that I think was so high quality, and it's going to help me so much with this. So I'm super grateful he was there. But those are just two crystal clear examples of what I've been talking about. So, really, to kind of sum it up, if you want to be a leader, you need to be able to work with a team, and you need to be able to communicate with that team. If you get to the point to where you can have conversations that have no emotional attachment whatsoever when you're talking about information, your team will run like clockwork. You will never have to worry about someone perceiving you wrong unless you're unclear with your instructions. Your team will never have to worry, if you're mad at them or if you're, punishing them or anything like that. It's just very straight to the point, matter-of-fact conversations. It saves you emotional energy, it saves you time, it saves you issues in the long run, it reduces your turnover, it gives you a higher quality of output. I can't even begin to communicate with you how important communication is. If there's one thing that you practice for the rest of this month, it needs to be your communication skills. So really, when you get to the point that your team can do this because you have trained them, you have taught them, you have set the expectation of this is how we communicate, that's just an effective organization. That's a team, and you show your team that you're able to be a leader. Communication, it's great.